Very fitting.
Very fitting because we're talking about Pro Day. Speaking of Pro Day, BetOnline, though, did come out with their Heisman Trophy odds. Some of them have been changed. So Drake May was plus 800, Joe. Just when BetOnline first came out with their Heisman odds, it has changed. Caleb Williams plus 500. Guess who the number 2 player in college football has the best odds to win the Heisman next season?
Michael Penix Jr.
No, Jordan Travis, Florida State, plus 800. He flips with Drake May, who's plus 1,000. Michael Penix Jr. goes all the way up to number 5 with plus 1,200. Then you got Sam Hartman, your boy, and then Bo Nix, Joe Milton, and then Jane Daniels rounds it out here. So really interesting. A lot of money coming in on Jordan Travis from Florida State. Your thoughts really quickly on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's trying to get their early big odds in right now, so the odds are shifting. I think that's what it's at, where it has been a bit of a media narrative that Jordan Travis has become this, sleeper guy for next year.
He's good.
He is, but at the same time, I don't know, man. I always get a little skeeved out, a little wary of guys who build this much buzz early. Like, I got to see what he does start of the season, early stretch of the season before I can fully commit to what his full outcome is going to be.
You mean like Bo Nix did last year?
No, because Bo didn't get hyped up this much as
Michael
Penix for.
Dan Lanning was running his happy ass out there every week during fall camp and spring saying, Bo Nix knows exactly who he is as a person. Well, no crap, Dan Lanning.
We didn't even know for sure, though, if Bo was going to start. Like, there was a possibility that Bo didn't.
Yeah,
there was a possibility he didn't. There was a possibility because they've got they had 2 5-stars in the roster.
Joe, that way down yonder on the Chattahoochee this weekend that my big ass isn't eating crawfish. Okay? So stop with the cap, as the young kids say. Come on now.
There were 2 5-stars. There was a competition. It's not like
true. That is
not like it wasn't possible. But no, I think everyone's trying to get in early on those odds before they aggressively start to shift further and further. I don't think it wouldn't be surprised if he's not the favorite by the time that we're like 2 weeks in, and if he has a couple of really good games.
If he beats LSU week 1, then
he goes right to the top. Everyone is going to ride his name the entire season if he beats LSU.
Here's the thing, Joe. Whichever quarterback wins that game, either if it's Jaden Daniels or if it is Jordan Travis, they go to the very top of that.
Absolutely.
I'm really interested. Speaking of draft prospects or future draft prospects, I am absolutely. There's not enough money in Tennessee for Joe Milton to be somebody who's got top 10 odds to win the Heisman. That means to tell me that somebody knows something. I will tell you. So talking about Tennessee spring, Joe, he's gotten a lot more accurate. Okay, like he has gotten a lot better from an accuracy standpoint. Some of the throws he's making is amazing. So, as an example, 2 quarterbacks this week. So let's get into this draft, this pro day stuff. So, one thing that I do want to say, this happened to 2 quarterbacks this week. Joe Milton and Jane Daniels, it both happened to. So I'll go with Jane Daniels first. Jane Daniels obviously is not going out in the draft, but Joe had the biggest day for LSU for their pro day. Okay, I'll talk about Kayshon Boutte in a minute and rip on him as an example. Dude, he's probably 15 pounds heavier. He's got a lot of the same speed, and Joe, he threw fantastic and wasn't really out there.
What's his weight right now? Because that for me is the biggest issue.
I would say 210. I would say he's like 208 to 210.
Okay.
With Joe, he was playing last year at 185.
Yes.
Okay, I'll send you the pictures. I mean, dude's gotten much bigger. I mean, like you could just tell. And that's one thing that Brian Kelly has done that LSU has not had was a Jake Flint who came from Notre Dame. I mean, like the strength and conditioning that Notre Dame had, LSU is really benefiting from that. Bill Belichick was following. This is true because Joe, like I'm there talking to scouts, whatever. Bill Belichick followed around Jane Daniels and talked to him the entire pro day. That's interesting to me. Same thing happened with Joe Milton. Joe Milton, besides Hendon Hooker, was throwing to some of these Tennessee guys.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, jaws were hitting the floor. not because of the arm strength, mainly due to how accurate he was. I know that you don't, I know it's just air. I get all that. And I will make this comparison in a minute about Anthony Richardson. I'm not going to overreact to what you do on air. However, I do think there is a little something, even with Anthony Richardson, to that. Like, look, man, the guy's gotten better. His feet's gotten better. Whatever it is, I think you can take some, but let's call it what it is. You can't take a lot from it. Do you agree with that?
Yes. So that was what I was just about to say. Just like, and I'm on this program stating this, I'm not changing my perspective on Anthony Richardson based on how he threw at the pro day.
You are.
No, I'm not. No, because these pro day workouts don't mean as much as I think a lot of people build them up to be. I think there's a lot of media members who don't understand the scouting process and don't understand that the pro days and the combine, the biggest aspect of it is for these teams to meet with the players and to talk to the players and get to know the players better. That's the major part. We already know that Anthony Richardson has a big arm. We already know that he can sit on his butt and throw a ball easily without standing up. We know that he can do all that. We know that he's a crazy athlete. We don't need to prove anything else. So as much as I don't like for him, I don't think it's very telling. For Joe Milton's sake, like, yeah, the guy's got a big arm. He's somebody who everyone's going to get all geeked up over. And I know he might have been a little bit more accurate, but he's throwing guys that aren't getting covered. He doesn't have any pressure coming down on him. That's where I need to know that Joe can be consistent. What does he do in an SEC game when he's got Harold Perkins chasing? I don't even know if they play each other this year, but but hypothetically, he's got Harold Perkins chasing his ass down, and he's got a receiver who is tightly covered, and he's got a short window to get the ball into.
Well, that's what I need to actually know. Or one of those Megatrons from Georgia. You know, I mean, like, yeah. One of those dudes. I agree with that. And, you know, Joe, you said something interesting that's so true and so right. Some media members have no idea what they're looking at. Like, dude, this whole thing about Anthony Richardson hitting the roof is on fire. The pass is, Joe, do you know how every head coach and every scout in America sees that pass when he hit the roof as an incomplete pass?
Yes.
Look, I don't mean this in a wrong way. I don't need nerds to tell me how good that was. It's not good. You're overreacting. And then, of all people, Todd McShay didn't run out there saying he hit the roof. Todd. Oh, let me rephrase that. Todd. It's horrible. Now,
I think Todd knows what he's doing, though. I think that there's other people who don't understand it's bad, but he's bringing that up because he knows that it pushes viewership and ratings. Like,
well, I am, because he thinks Anthony Richardson should be the #1 overall pick to some extent. So
I might agree with Todd. We're not doing that on today's show. We're not letting the wheels go off.
I don't like you. I just don't like you. All right. There was one thing as we get into these pro days. There is one thing I like about Anthony Richardson that's changed. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Footwork. I don't think that so this is why I get on the case for Billy Napier, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm not sold on him. I was not sold on him at ULL. People in Lafayette, you're going to hate me for saying ULL. Get over it. Eat a boudin ball. Bottom line is, Joe, how can his footwork change that drastically in 6 weeks? I mean, it's unreal that Billy Napier can't. Look, here's what I do think, though. I do think Dan Mullen's a damn good quarterbacks coach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Why is Anthony Richardson willing to change now instead of Dan Mullen or Billy Napier? So it's like a double-edged sword. Like, I don't.
He was really young with Dan Mullen. He was really young when Mullen was there. So
was Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud when they were with their respective coaches, right? Like, I don't think that you can make that excuse because, look.
They came in as more ready to play recruits than Anthony Richardson was, though. But I love it when you prove my point, though, Blake, that, yes, I think that he was hindered significantly by Billy Napier. But most importantly.
When did I ever say he wasn't?
No. That's not my point. My point has always been that Anthony Richardson is the best athlete. He is the most natural athlete at the position in the entire class. So if you give him proper coaching, he is going to learn quicker than other guys. He is going to put it together than other guys. He has never had good, proper coaching. He hasn't
No,
been
that's
worth
not true. That's not true. Dan
Yes,
Mullen's a witch offensively. Stop that.
but Billy Napier clearly did nothing to help him progress, so he stagnated after that first spot starter year under Dan Mullen, and he stagnated right at that spot. Did not improve at all, and that's basically what we saw this year. That is what my whole point has been, is that he's inexperienced and he was not properly coached to
He's
make those
super.
improvements. And I think that your point about the footwork is a great point. The more that he gets good NFL coaching, I'm actually curious now who his quarterback coach is and who he's been training with, because that's also usually pretty telling of how they'll develop. But I think if he goes to the right team with a progressive offensive coordinator, a good offensive coordinator
You
like
mean
Steichen, the Colts head coach,
that's
I
right.
think that he's going to be so freaking good.
Speaking of that, okay. Speaking of fits and people that really want somebody, I told you this a couple weeks ago and everybody called me nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I texted it to you, my screenshot that I was sending people. Okay. What about this CJ Stroud thing to Carolina, dude? Okay. Did you hear what's the quarterback coach name at Carolina now? What's his name?
Josh McCown.
Josh McCown. He said, well, you'll be able to hoop when you're out there in Charlotte next year.
Well, he said, I forget what it's when you move to Charlotte. That was the even more leading statement that he made, which is
Bryce
like, oh
Young
my
ain't
God.
going #1 overall, bro. You don't.
Yeah.
Josh McCown does not make that statement if they're not drafting CJ Stroud, in my opinion. Am I crazy with that?
I agree with you, but one of my co-hosts pointed out to me that I think it was Kyle Shanahan made like a very similar, not comment, but was hovering around and following around Justin Fields during his pro day very similarly. And we thought kind of a lot of people were pushing that like maybe this picks Justin Fields. It didn't end up being it. Ended up being Trey Lance.
But that played out in the media, though. Remember that played out in the media between Shanahan and their GM. Why is it the whole who's the San Francisco GM?
John Lynch.
John Lynch. Remember, they were going back and forth with the media because God bless it. Why am I blanking? John Lynch wanted Trey Lance, and your boy Shanahan wanted Justin Fields. Like that played out pretty immensely in that draft. So I don't think Carolina, though, as an example. So look, I think Anthony Richardson, just very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I look, as much as I might not like it, okay, in my personal opinion, he's still going to be probably a top 10 pick. All right, where he's going to
go, way he slides out after this whole process.
Just don't. Well, I say that, but then Malik Willis didn't run a 4.40, okay, in the combine. But I talking about some of these pro days, this is why I always say Ohio State's the closest thing to the SEC that we have not in the SEC. Dude, they got athletes and dudes everywhere. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. out there running routes for CJ Stroud is unreal. Jackson Smith and Jigba running like he's throwing to NFL dudes. Okay. I don't like the compare. You know what, Joe? And this was their knock. This was the knock that I heard on CJ Stroud. You ready for it? That I absolutely hate. Well, he's throwing the first round wide receivers. Well, how did that help Burrow? See, what's so funny to me about like these draft dudes who say, well, he's got first round picks. Well, here's the problem, because you'll draft a guy and then when he doesn't have success, you'll say, well, he doesn't have the weapons. Well, no crap, he doesn't have the weapons. Yeah. So it doesn't matter to me that he's throwing the two first round picks. I think CJ Stroud's made himself a crap load of money in this process. And I think it shows just how good of Ryan Day was as a like, look, man, they had a really good offense. Like they've been a really good offensive team. They just don't have, I don't know what Ohio State's missing. I think that there's an underlying thing here. And we talked about this on our last show. I think they're the most overrated program in the country, depending on how much talent they produce without winning a natty, right? Like I always continue to say that. But ultimately, for me, I think CJ Stroud made himself a lot of money and showed why he was a really good quarterback this last year.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of irony definitely with people bringing up the having to throw to first round receivers. I will say, though, I think CJ more than other quarterbacks, I am concerned when he steps into a bad situation where he's going to probably have bad receivers and a bad offensive line. What does he do, though?
You say that. I mean, is Adam Thielen poo? Is
Well,
Terrence Marshall poo?
That was more of a vague, overarching statement of like wherever he gets drafted. I think specifically the Carolina Panthers do have an underrated offensive line. The receivers are okay. So that's my situation here. My thought here is that when he's not throwing to the best guys on the field, the best athletes on the field, what is he going to do? And he has always been somebody who, when things don't open up, when that initial read does not open up,
he struggles.
He does the worst possible thing. I'd rather have a Lamar Jackson in his rookie year where the first thing didn't open up and he just ran. CJ stands there. CJ, he floats and then he gets hit. That you can't do. That's the Daniel Jones syndrome. He needs to work out of that. That for me is the biggest thing. And I'd argue that might be a pretty good pro comp for what CJ Stroud does in his first year is Daniel Jones, because Daniel had everything, man. Daniel had a really natural throwing motion. He was pretty accurate. Big arm, great athlete, but didn't really necessarily use it effectively in college. Mm-hmm. But up here, mentally, despite being a smart kid, couldn't figure it out really. Took him a while. He's kind of figuring it out now. I think it's going to be the same deal with CJ. We're going to be saying a ton of that about CJ Stroud. I don't look too much into the pro day stuff, but for him specifically, but I do think he's going to be the first overall pick at this point.
It seems like it's trending that way. A receiver that we unfortunately didn't get to see a lot of this year, Jackson Smith and Jigba. What's your thoughts on him? Because I'm going to tell you. Can I tell you? Here's a hot take of the show. You ready?
Yeah.
I don't think he's good enough yet.
My thing with Smith and Jigba,
he's got loud hands. He's got very loud hands. And if you talk to any scout, loud.
I don't disagree with that, but I still think he's got great for what
he does. But it's loud hands. You ever heard?
I know what you mean.
Loud hands.
Yes, I know what you mean. He's not a supernatural catcher. He's not
a supernatural catcher.
My thing with JSN, I'm disappointed that he didn't play this year because I think I'd be a little more confident in what his capability is had he played. The other thing as well for him, and I just spent all this time talking about CJ Stroud. You place him in that situation of the year where he played a full year, removed the 300-yard game, and that's 300 less yards in his season total. And then on top of that, he still finished with, I think, like 1,300 yards. You watch a lot of those games, and he gets open because a lot of attention is diverted.
He's an elite route runner. He's an elite route runner.
He's a fantastic route runner, but a lot of attention is altered and focused on that year to Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And there's a number of routes that I could sit here and pull up where he's open because it's a really well-schemed offense. It's a really well-schemed offense to set up that tertiary receiver to get open. I wanted to see what he was going to do this year as the primary go-to guy. He wasn't going to bump out to X. He was going to probably play in the slot again. But what does he do when he is the guy? And that's what's going to happen. Wherever he is drafted, he might be, if he's drafted early, the number one receiver. I don't think that's his role in the NFL. He's not that guy. He is a slot tertiary guy who is going to be very productive with a crowded, talented receiver room. That's what he needs to go to. He can't go. I'm trying to think of a good example. He can't go to Carolina and be the number one guy there. He just can't.
Here's my thing. Okay, you ready? When it comes to Ohio State, how many times are you going to have this many elite wide receivers, running backs, DBs, etc., and you not win it? Joe, I think that here's my thing. This is a staple that I go by in college football. With great recruiting comes great expectations. Okay, if you're going to recruit on the level and have players at the level that Ohio State does, I know that you played for a national title a couple years ago in the COVID year, but you got blanked, dude. At some point, Joe, this isn't just a Ryan Day issue. This happened under Urban too. Now, Urban won the first college football playoff. Good for him. I mean, but how long are we going to go off of that they have that much talent and continue to get that much talent, and they just don't win? Like, for me, if any other team not named Ohio State, like if a team in the SEC, a team in the Pac-12, a team in the ACC, we do it with Clemson. We've done it with LSU. We've done it with Georgia in the past before they won back-to-back natties. We do it with USC. We do it with so many other teams. But when it comes to Ohio State, we never, not once, talk about how much of underperforming they're doing with how much talent they're producing. You cannot have that much NFL talent on a team and not break through and win one.
For me, Ohio State, I think that it's easy to sit here and place blame on Ryan Day, but I actually don't think that it's really a Ryan Day issue because he's an offensive coach. I look at the success that they've produced has been offensively. I look at the fact that they had one of the best offensive lines and they're going to have 2 guys drafted in the top 100.
That's even worse, Joe. That makes it even worse for me.
But they have never been a team that hasn't produced offensively. I think a lot of their issues have come on the defensive side of the football. And I know I'm blanking on the defensive coordinator's name that they got from Oklahoma State.
Cooks. Not Kerry Cooks. Kerry Combs.
No, that's not him. The guy that they got from Oklahoma State.
Kerry Combs.
I'm going to look that up in a second. Their defensive coordinator is better than what they had before.
Jim Knowles.
Jim Knowles. I knew that wasn't right. Jim Knowles is a great defensive coordinator. I think for the long term, there's a lot of potential and upside, and they looked a lot better this past season. But the problem is that they're no longer, since Urban left, they have not recruited the defensive side of the football well at all. This is very Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley-esque, where all this attention, you're getting all these big name recruits on the offensive side of the football. You're getting a 5-star receiver, a 5-star quarterback, a 5-star offensive tackle, a 5-star running back. But then you look through their recruiting class and you're like, okay, where are the defensive players? Where are those corners, the Sean Wades of the world, the Jeff Okudas of the world, the Nick Bosas, the Chase Youngs? They haven't had anyone near that caliber in a very long time since Urban Meyer. I
agree with that. They got that Jermaine Matthews kid. They got the Calvin.
I don't know if he's a first-round pick. That Tiamalamoto kid, I'm totally butchering his name, is supposed to be extremely talented, and we saw some spurts of him in his first real year as a starter. He has some potential, but across the board, they're really lacking those 5 stars that they needed. That's what's something I don't think is talked about enough, that they're not focusing on the defensive side of the ball.
I have to push back on that because, like, I'm going down, like, as an example, right? C.J. Hicks, 5-star linebacker. Sonny Styles, safety, 6'4", 215, 5-star. And then you got Kenyatta Jackson, 5-star edge player. Omar Abar, okay, or Amari Abar, edge, 5-star. Joe, they've had them. I'm going down 247 right now. They've had.
But what are those guys' contributions, though? They might,
but that's my point. Okay, that's my point. Why are you going there to Ohio State and underperforming?
There's not enough defensive development. Again, I don't want to put any blame on the offensive side of the football. I solely place this on the defensive side of the ball and the development of those athletes and properly recruiting the right athletes to play in your system.
All right, you want to move? Let's move to a couple more guys, though.
Yes.
As we go on, I'm not going to say anything yet. I want you to make this because I've already talked on this, but I want to give this to you because I don't want there to be any homerism.
Okay.
All right. Here's some guys, though. So we talked about 3 guys. Actually, let me do this. Let's get to one more guy that everybody's talking really highly about, and then get to a couple guys that are falling. Will Levis. We did talk about him. Do you want to? I mean, we talked about him pretty much. I mean, there's nothing really else to say with him, but just in case.
So the goofy thing with Will Levis, what I wanted to bring up, we've had this week, there's I think it was the Dove Kleiman guy or one of those. There's these terrible Twitter aggregators that have big followings that don't have actual sources. There has been reporting that Will Levis is bombing interviews. I find that very hard to believe.
No, he's bombing interviews.
Is he actually, though? He was supposed to be this high character kid.
This is the problem that I've heard that he's saying. He's basically going in there and saying, if you don't take me first, you're going to pay. And it is rubbing some organizations the wrong way. Now, let me tell you something.
I don't think bombing that's kind of stupid to take take that into account for a kid just because he's confident.
Right. So for me, as an example, I talked to one team that has a top 5 pick. I'm not going to reveal. I can probably
guess who it is.
Okay. In the interview that they had with him, he walked up to their owner and said, "If you don't draft me, it's going to be the worst decision that you've ever made." And then he gave over his whatever questionnaire that they had. He said, "Have a good day," and walked out. And I was told by a buddy of mine that was in that meeting that the owner looked at him and said, go reevaluate him right now. Like, so
in a good way or a bad way?
In a good way. So then this is the second question that I asked. Are y'all putting out false stuff to people to get people to stay away from Will Levis? They said yes.
Yes. I think that this is perfect smokescreen.
1000%.
And we might get to Jalen Carter on this. It's the same deal. Everyone needs to remember what time of year it is. We are so close to the NFL draft. It is April. It is coming up. Something like that is perfect bait for a team to be like, okay, he was really intense and we like that. But if we spin this, we put this out to some agents, we put this out to some media people, and this gets pushed out there, a team that might have felt a little weird about the conversation might then allow it to completely dominate their thought process.
No doubt.
It doesn't usually work. It doesn't necessarily work, but we're trying to create these fake narratives so that he falls. I really think that he's going to be the second overall pick to the Houston Texans based on what we know that they value at the quarterback position. I don't think it's going to be Bryce because, and I've been saying this a lot, that I think that they're going to pick him because of what Caserio, as a former disciple of Belichick, is going to value as a quarterback. I will say this, though.
It would not shock me.
Yes. I will say this, though, Blake. I think I didn't know that aspect of it that you brought up. The dude seems corny as all hell, man. To him to be like, if you don't draft me, that's too intense, man. That's way too intense.
You know who else is corny?
Such a hardo.
Well, hold on.
It's just like the pictures, man. He's such a hardo.
Hold on now. Don't act like we ain't have no corny quarterbacks that have absolutely gone out there and performed now.
Yeah.
You know, here's some quarterbacks that come to mind just off the top of my head. Andrew Luck. Hey, buddy, Andrew, stop. Okay, number 2.
He wasn't a hardo.
Hold on. What?
Not like this. Andrew Luck wasn't going around telling people, if you don't draft me, you're going to regret
this. You know what Andrew Luck was doing? You know what Andrew Luck was doing? He was going around to his teammates giving report cards.
Yeah, that's him being a dork. That's not him being like
then that's
overly intense hardo.
Here's the problem I have with Will Levis.
Yeah.
Number one, I think that he tries to do too much at times. I think he's got all the athletic ability. I think that he's got all of the tools that you need. I think he is accurate enough. I do think that he has a big enough arm. I do think he is athletic enough. Joe, name one skill player at Kentucky that's worth a damn. Name one.
There are none.
Okay. So he's doing that in the SEC. I'm going to give him a little bit more than I do Anthony Richardson, because Anthony Richardson had more talent around him. You know what tells me that? Recruiting. Okay. Do you really think that Kentucky had a good offensive scheme too? Stop that. No. Okay, stop that. So
wait, my big problem though with Will Levis and why I don't think he's going to be successful.
You're going to let a dude finish? You yelled at me all week about you don't let me finish.
Oh, I thought you were done. I thought you were transitioning points.
Go ahead.
All I was going to say is that the guy has no touch with the football. He doesn't know how to take anything off.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Because you're okay with him not having touch.
You know what you're getting with Will Levis. I think Will Levis can run a system better than what Anthony Richardson can. That's a big thing. You got to be able to go in there and command the room and run a system.
Yeah. I think though, and there's evidence of it on tape, I don't need a guy who is ripping a pass, a flare route at a running back, and it's uncatchable, or overthrowing him.
I agree with that. And he did that a lot. Well, he also did that too because he was getting hit. Like he was the most hit quarterback in the SEC the last 2 seasons. Okay.
He was.
There's one thing here's another thing that a scout told me the other day. He goes, Blake, do you remember when Kentucky played Ole Miss and Will Levis's finger was pointing like horizontally? Okay. He goes, the kid went back in there, taped it up, and then he went 8 for 10 in his next 10 passes. That's the kind of stuff that we see because we can take a kid and help him develop before we can take a kid that doesn't want to work. All right. So we'll see on Will Levis as well. Let's get to some guys that are falling. I'm going to let you go with this one first because I've talked about it this week and I don't want to seem homerish. Your thoughts on Kayshon Boutte falling so much from a first round to possibly a third round pick in this draft?
Well, it all started with he might even go further than that, Blake. I'm actually going to be completely honest with you. He
Oh,
might be going further than the third round. It all started with him not having a very consistent or productive year. Everyone with this anticipation of this really talented kid was he was going to come in, he was going to light things up, new offensive system that should benefit him, a new quarterback that's going to get him the football, that he was going to be the most productive player. He doesn't do any of that. Then there are the whole concern of his dismissal, or not really dismissal, but departure, let's phrase it that way, of the team. There has not been a positive step throughout this entire process. And then on top of that, he looks like he hasn't been putting any effort in or preparing. This is some of the same stuff that I talk about with Stetson Bennett, where I don't think that he's been focused on and preparing as intently as some other guys. I think that his ideology is that my shit doesn't stink. Everybody knows how good I am. The NFL is going to know how good I am, and I'm going to step in and play. I will say this, though, and I don't think that Jarvis Landry had this type of a pro day process, but he did have very terrible testing numbers. I could see Kayshawn coming into the NFL as a late round pick and then having a high impact because he's a good player and he's got a good quarterback that knows how to get his head on straight. But
like if he goes to the Jets as an example, like if the Jets drafted him in the third round and A-Rod's there, that's a great spot for him. Now, those personalities.
Or if he's like a Bengals pick, like that would be perfect for him to go.
Joe ain't going to do that. Joe ain't going to let that happen. Hey, listen to me. Joe ain't going to let that happen. There's one thing that Joe does not like from his receivers, being a diva.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Listen to me. Listen to me. It ain't happening. Let me tell you this. I would be utterly shocked if Kayshawn got drafted by Cincinnati.
Okay.
Utterly shocked. Now, my only thing with Kayshawn, you're spot on. Now, I don't think he falls out of the third because I think that he's got like that Georgia play that he made where he went 70. Okay. Like, come on, dude. Like, let's be real. You know that the dude's got athletic ability. The problem with me is he has a 340-pound offensive lineman having a higher vertical than he does. That is inexcusable.
Do you want to know something funny, by the way? I don't mean to cut you off. So this reminds me of the fact that his vertical was bad. During my pro day, we had a kid on my team. We had 3 guys go to the NFL Combine. One of the receivers that was supposed to get drafted doesn't get drafted. He vertical is only like 27 inches. It's the worst receiver vertical ever. Guess who had a higher vertical than him?
Who?
Me. I had a higher vertical than a guy that went to the NFL Combine. And like, that's not me patting my back. It's like, that's a concern. Like you compare these two things and it's like, mine was like an inch better. And it's to your point, you're supposed to be this good athlete, but you can't freaking jump. It's either a lack of preparation or just in general, a lack of intent, I would argue.
I agree with that. All right. The last one, because I want to get to this NIL stuff and because I think we'll speak about this at length. I don't want to get to Jalen Carter. You can talk about him if you want to. I think I think that we have talked about that too much, and I've told you that. Let me go on a little bit of a rant here. O'Cyrus Torrence, the offensive guard from Florida /ULL, whatever you want to say. Joe, you know what they're saying about O'Cyrus Torrence?
What?
They're talking about how his numbers are bad. You know who else's numbers were really bad at the Combine and Pro Day? This guy by the name of Orlando Brown. How's he doing? You can't test offensive linemen based off of numbers, pure numbers. Joe, what did the film tell me about O'Cyrus Torrence? He is a monster in the middle. He claps everybody that gets in his path. He is an avalanche that is just going downhill constantly. If he is the true definition, O'Cyrus Torrence is a true definition of a mauler. Okay.
Yes.
I don't want to. The only position for me that I don't like if he can't bench 225 8 times, okay, maybe, yeah, all right, cool. But offensive line is just not a position that you can go off based off of pure numbers because look at the numbers like Trevor Penning last year had amazing numbers. The dude got his ass kicked, okay, up and down the field when he played. Eric Fisher as an example. The number 1 overall pick that went to Kansas City. He got clapped around for multiple seasons. Turn on the film for O'Cyrus Torrence. You cannot. He ran a 4.4. He ran a 4.3 40, and he's going 10 yards at max. any given play. He's not running 40 yards on any given play. What is his 10-yard split? What is his 5-yard split? What's his shuttle look like? He's one of the best, if not the best, offensive lineman, in my opinion, in this draft from an inside perspective.
I will say this. I will say this, though. The 40 I'm not paying attention to. His short area number is terrible, which is
what's
not
his
a good
short area number?
His short shuttle, he got a 5.22. Oh, no. Wait.
No, that's his 40.
I'm misreading this.
Yeah, you're misreading.
This stupid graphic is very hard to read. He had a 4.81, which is still a pretty slow number for
not for no lineman. Not for no lineman.
Not a great number. A 23.5-inch vertical is not great as well.
But he had a higher vert than Kayshon Boutte.
Wait, what was Kayshon's vert?
29.
23.5.
I thought you said 29.5.
No, 23.5. I do agree with you though. This on Torrance, I don't think anyone's taking into account. This is another one of those like media pushed ones where I think a lot of media folks are like, "Oh, look at Torrance, he can't really move." I knew on the film that this kid had slow feet and that he's a haul to get moving forward in a power-based offense, power-based system like that. He's who I want.
To Baltimore, you're in trouble.
He is displacing the shit out of dudes. He is moving dudes so easily. He is so freaking strong. You said he's a mauler. Perfect way to describe him. There's a reason why he doesn't play tackle, by the way. He's a big dude, but he doesn't play tackle.
He's a guard.
He's not. You don't need him to move in space. Short area. What does he do from his couple of yards of space that he is accounted for? I know that he's good enough to do it. He's a strong dude with a big ass. I know that he's going to be a great player. No, there's no pause on that.
You just said he's a dude with a big old ass. Pause. Yes.
Yeah, but there's no pause in that because he's got a big ass, and I'm appreciating his big ass. I want guards with big asses. Big anchor is what I want. Just like I want my defensive tackles to have big asses. That's exactly what I look for. Torrance is going to be a great pro, though. I don't think anyone's thinking he's going to be a first-round pick, but second round, he'll get drafted. He's going to be a plug-and-play starter.
Are you saying he's on the all-ass team?
He's on the all-ass team.
Does his milkshake bring you to the yard?
I'm not going to go that far.
All right. So let's talk about this NIL thing as we wrap up the show before we get to some of the listener questions and thoughts. So Joe, this week we had a congressional hearing for NIL. I'm going to rip both parties here. And first off, I hate getting political. Okay. I don't want our show to be political, but when college football, as an example, or college athletics becomes political, I don't think that we have a choice other than to talk about it. So in this hearing, there's 4 major points that I want to hit on here. The lack of knowledge by lawmakers on what NIL truly is when we've had 22 months to discuss this is abysmal. If any political or any elected official doesn't know the basic principles of NIL, and you've had 24 months to research it, then what else are you missing on a day in, day out basis? Number 2, they said that, well, you know how you just do it? Do revenue sharing. Revenue sharing in college athletics is not going to work because here's the problem. You want to make it so much like the NFL. You want to make it so much like the NBA. You want to make it so much like all these other things. They have revenue sharing, but they also don't have Title IX. There's this little issue called Title IX that we have issues with. If you want to do revenue sharing, women's athletics would be dismissed. I'm calling it what it is. College baseball would be dismissed to some extent. College basketball, because as an example in the SEC, about 2/3 of the funding that you get is for football. That's not going to work with Title IX. Here's the biggest issues that I have, though. This coming from Diana Harshbarger and this coming from Chris Murray, the Republican from Tennessee and the Democrat from Connecticut. This is Diana Harshbarger saying that this is not sustainable. Well, no crap, Sherlock. That's why we're in a congressional hearing. But she says that you have one donor that will give a school or program $8 to $10 million that won't do that every year. Babe, yes, they will.
Well, so that's not how donations work, too. Like
they're doing it already. people are giving that amounts of money to the programs anyway. It happens every year. The simple fact that you don't know that is why you don't need to be on this committee. She also says you can play for, so you mean to tell me, this is a question she asked. She says, you mean to tell me that you can play for a year and then go into the portal after 1 year to get more money? Yes. How do you not know that? How do you not know?
That's the whole issue.
That's the whole issue. That is the 1,000% issue of why everybody has an issue with NIL and the transfer portal. It's because after 1 year, kids are going into the portal and getting more NIL money to go to bigger programs or other programs. How do you not know that that is the main issue, Harshbarger? And then I'm going to tiptoe down this because people who know me know I'm coming at this with a pure heart. But then Chris Murphy, the Democrat from Kentucky or from Connecticut, he wants to make it a race issue. This is not a race issue. NIL is paying more minority college athletes than ever before. I don't understand why he's trying to make this a race issue. He says, and I'm quoting, if those predominantly white coaches and white NCAA execs can have an extended and have multiple endorsement deals, why shouldn't predominantly black students have the same opportunity? They are having the same opportunity. We're not asking, this is not a race issue. We're asking you for federal regulation to stop from kids going into the portal and kids being poached. That is ultimately the issue that we have here. This is not a political race issue that you're trying to make it. Then he says, this is a pro league. It's just like every other pro league. Y'all got to figure it out. That is a quote from Chris Murphy. It's not a pro league. It is college athletics. You don't understand this because, number one, you're a blithering idiot. How are you this big of an idiot? And then Diana Harshbarger, both of them, both sides of the aisle, Joe, here are complete and utter idiots. And then both of them run out there with their college, with one, I think she had a Tennessee thing, and then one person had a Florida helmet on, and I'm like, y'all aren't taking this seriously, Joe.
That's ridiculous. The last part's ridiculous. Sorry, continue.
But I would get paid $50,000 a year to be the commissioner. We got to go to a commissioner, Joe, because if you don't and you don't have rules based, you can't get a salary cap, Joe. You can't have a salary cap. What they're going to have to do, you want to know how you stop this? Let me tell you what has to happen. You have to hit schools for tampering. If you start popping schools for recruiting violations with tampering, it will stop, or you will find out really quickly who the teams are doing it. You got to come down with legislation that if you're tampering in recruiting, that you have issues. They didn't. So here's another thing with our political society. They are the main reason, by the way, that NIL is a problem or an issue anyway, because they sided with your boy for the NCAA football game, okay? You're the reason that this is going on. And then the stupid NCAA has allowed all this to happen because they want to go to federal court on it. Joe, we're back at square one.
Yeah.
We're back at square one.
The problem is now that we've brought them into discussion and they're 3 steps behind. And like, I look at what Chris Murphy was saying, and all I get from that is he's trying to make the argument that he seems like the debate is if NIL should be a thing. And that's not what we're talking about. It's how do we regulate this so that it's fair and that there is less wild lack of control over it and the way that it's handled. I think that the biggest thing here is that we need more put in place to simplify the process. Look, I think what would really make it better, Blake, is that if you sign an NIL deal and you sign a contract, you have to stay at the school for a certain period of time. It's that simple. That is going to alleviate so many issues. And there needs to be a standard national contract that is signed by the donor or the marketing representative or whoever is paying the check and the athlete and the school. Those 3 parties need to have a consistent contract, and they need to sign it. That is what you would hope would come from these things, that they would be caught up and take this seriously enough to realize there is a wild lack of accountability across the board, from the donors, from the players, from the coaches, everything. There's a wild lack of accountability and consistency. If we have a standard contract that is required to be signed across the board with the same clauses, there's no players getting screwed, there's no teams getting screwed, no donors getting screwed, that would simplify it. But we're not. We're starting, as you said, at ground zero with people asking dumb questions that we had already answered years ago.
You can easily stop all of this. Okay. You're not going to stop it in recruiting. You're just not. You can't stop it in recruiting because of the basic nature. It's already been happening. Mm-hmm. Joe, I know of a former athlete, as an example, that got paid $400,000 to go to the University of Alabama through a 4-year stretch. Okay. Mm-hmm. I also know of a former Heisman Trophy winner who got paid $150,000 to stay for his senior year.
Yeah.
So this has been going on. You're just seeing. So it's you know what? This is the honest analogy that I have. Basically, it's like a kid going on a field trip to see how what happens in a sewage leak, right? Like, what all happens with your garbage when you throw it in the trash? When your eyes get open to things that you had no idea that was going on, you're just seeing the sewage that is of recruiting up close and personal. And people, you ever seen the movie The Dark Knight?
Yes.
Do you remember when Heath Ledger's Joker said, a whole bus full of people can, a bus can explode, but one little mayor gets shot and the whole town starts freaking out? He's right. One little thing or one thing happens. We focus on everything. We focus on, NIL so bad. You had no idea how kids were, how kids were getting to schools like Ohio State, LSU, Bama, Florida, Notre Dame beforehand. Don't be naive. Why we're getting the congressional hearings in this? Isn't this why we hired a political guy to run the NCAA? And he's supposed to be the one fixing this?
Well, right. That's the biggest irony too here now, is that we brought this guy to, the idiot, to speak to the idiots, and the idiots are all just mucking the whole thing up.
Joe, the idiot didn't even show up. Your new NCAA president didn't even go to the hearing. You know that, right?
What was he doing?
I don't know. That's a great question, but he was not there. You know what he did? He let Trey Burton, former Florida quarterback and was a tight end in the league. He let him and a Florida State softball player go up against congressional members to explain this.
This is never gonna get fixed.
It's never gonna get
never gonna get fixed. That is, these hearings are, but big thing here and final takeaway. It's never gonna get fixed because, as we know, the political system will drag anything out and no progress will actually be made. It'll be years before something happens.
None. And you know what else? We won't have our freaking video game.
Well, no, the video game's coming. That's all I care about.
They keep pushing it back. It was supposed to come out in 2024, but now it's coming out in 2025. 4 years ago, 4 years ago, it was supposed to be released in 2023. Joe, we were supposed to have the college football game this year.
Yeah, and it was. I would rather the game be done right, though. I think it's just because they're spending more time developing it and making sure all their T's are crossed.
I want to go up. I want to play as Brian Kelly and flip the schedule around. And instead of playing USC in week 1, I want to play Notre Dame in South Bend, and I'm going to score 95 points on them in the first half.
By the way, I was going to text you a picture of this last week. So I have the old NCAA 14 and I play it sometimes. It's just a random stupid side comment. I was playing against LSU and I beat them. No, I beat them 72-0, and I almost took a picture of it and sent it to you. This is on a high difficulty too. I beat them 72-0, and I was like, "Do I send this to Blake?" And I'm like, "No, I'm gonna let him enjoy his weekend. I'm the loser who's sitting here playing video games." So